Good morning, family and friends of Oakland Cemetery. It's December 23rd on the holiday weekend, right before Christmas here. We're in section 1 of Oakland Cemetery, and to the left, excuse me, to your right, we have several stones that we're prospecting to work on or to look at, and we're going to go over each one individually just to kind of explain what our intent is. And then some of these stones have been here for well over 100 years, so we're not sure how far deep the stone may have sunk. We don't know the condition of the stone, and then where we can go from there. But our primary stone, we don't quite have a name for it yet, will actually be to my right, right next to my feet. So this stone right here, we have our probing tool. We're going to look at one, how far the stone goes down, if there's a base on it or not. And the next time you see us in the clip, we'll actually have our tripod set up once we determine how we're going to move the stone out of the way. So that's that one. There's a couple more to the right. The one that's directly behind me, the stone is physically cracked. So there's a probably like a 45-degree crack in the stone. What we have to determine is if we have to raise the foundation and reset it, so that way you have a strong base. And then based off the condition of the crack, we just have to kind of clean it off and use an epoxy. And then the intent would be using clamps in several directions to make sure that the epoxy sets solid. Now, that will also determine what we have to do with the other stones that are to my right, to your right. There's a Charles Smith stone, which is back here. That one we have to figure out. We see the stone, we see the headstone itself, but we have to determine if there's an actual foundation to it or not. Because if there's no foundation stone and all we do is we raise the tablet up, it's going to be pretty weak in the air. So we just kind of have to figure out what we're going to do with that one. And so there's always a lot of unforeseens that can be that you may experience while you're doing raise and resets of stones. And then on the far right, there's a stone, kind of like the one behind me, where there's almost like a 45-degree crack. So that's where we would have to reset the foundation and then clamp that down with the epoxy in place. Of course, you have to do some preparation and whatnot. We'll go into that for the later videos, but our primary right now is the stone that's below the ground, and we'll actually come up with a name once that stone is in the air. So hopefully we have a name for you in the next clip. We'll see you. All right, friends and family, here we are back at section 1, Oakland Cemetery, here kind of in our next cut. The first stone of concern that we were talking about was this stone that was laying down on the ground. You could barely even read it, but it looks to be a stone for 2 individuals, and that's it says Our Little Darlings, D-A-R-L-I-N-G-S, so plural, Johnny and Grable, G-R-E-B-L-E. We tried to find a base on it because it's not uncommon where the base is actually split. So we probed around, we could not find a base, and then we tried to locate individuals, like surrounding personnel that may be related to these 2 individuals. Nothing was listed that we could find, so Mr. Harmon has a lot of experience with this, with the actual cemetery charts and whatnot, and we'll attempt to look up Johnny and Grable by using those charts, and then we may get back to you with that on a later cut. And then Mr. Harmon's going to zoom in on the stone, and then I'm going to walk over to Mr. Charles Smith, so I'll just see you here in a second. Alright, so back, so while we were probing for the 2 children's stone, we pretty much took a family plot area using our probing tool, and every so many inches we hit the ground and we went as far as we could. We could not locate a stone there, and what we did is we kind of gridded out an area. So basically there is a if you were to take a 1 foot by 1 foot section, we just went down so far, left so far, up so far, we covered that area, and then did that in the surrounding area where the stone was found. Well, in the process of doing that, with Charles Smith's stone, we saw how the tablet was just in the ground, and we were able to freely move it. When we put the probing tool to the surrounding area of the stone, it pretty much went all the way down, so it's almost like we could not find the base. And sure enough, not necessarily by accident, but while looking for the children's stone, we actually found the base right here, probably about 4 inches in front of where Charles Smith's stone was. It appears to be a pretty large base, probably about 24 inch by a 1 foot base and about 10 inches high. General rule, when you're working with these, keep in mind, safety is number one. When you have to determine whether you can physically move it with yourself or the people you're working with. We are fortunate enough to have like half-ton chain fall to work with this. And what they say, and we kind of pointed this out on our memorial markers for veteran stones, that every veteran stone's about, is it 130 pounds?
200.
200, so it's about 200 plus pounds for the stone. The bronze plaques are 15 pounds. And a general rule with concrete, of course you can look this up, is every cubic feet is about 150 pounds, so 125 to 150 pounds for a cubic feet. So be aware of what you're working with, do it safely, and then in the end, what we plan on doing is that we've determined the size of the stone. We used some wedges. We actually used our post hole digging tool, pried up the stone, so now the stone's sitting on the side. We put some wedges in there, and with the wedges secure, what we're going to do is we're going to put a piece of nylon around that around the foundation, and then that will allow us to lift that foundation up. Once we lift the foundation up, we will put the concrete blocks or the fill on the base, verify and check our level, and then we'll make a determination of what we have to do with Mr. Smith's stone. If you have any comments or questions, just leave it in the comment section below, and then we'll check in with you in the next cut. Alright folks, we're back here at the site of Charles Smith, section 1. What I wanted to show you, we kind of pointed this out in a few of our earlier videos, where when we do our leveling of the stone, especially our larger stones, what we do now, what we kind of did is that we had a whole bunch of flat concrete pieces, and what we kind of found, and you just have to find your own method that may work well for you. We have 2 basically concrete blocks that are at the base of the tripod, and that's where we're going to set the foundation stone. So the foundation stone actually has a nylon strap to it, and the principle of what we do is when you set the foundation stone on, we will level that out, and then in turn the headstone, when we place it on, in this case we're going to have to epoxy it on, that will be level in itself. But instead of having to level everything all at once, what we did is that we took, just imagine if these were 2 large concrete blocks, we put them at the base, and then we ran this piece across the top. So we put our level on it, and so if the rocks that the foundation is being placed on is not level, it's a very simple solution. You just level the foundation of the fill, if you will, the fill foundation. So then what you do is just like, okay, it's high on this side, it's low on this side. Which way do you want to go? So then we raise it up, adjust the foundation to your right, and then once it's level, we also check the alignment for the front on the width end. And then once that's level, we're going to fill it. And then once the foundation stone, the actual grave site's foundation stone is set on it, it should get us really close to the proper alignment of where we want to be. So that way we're not having to manipulate the entire gravestone up and down for measurement. We will still fine tune it, but it just gives us about 75% to 80% of where we want to be before we actually set the foundation stone. So we'll see you in the next cut when the chain fall is on the tripod. Alright folks, we're back at Charles Smith's stone here in section 1. Just want to give you a recap of where we are and what we've done so far. The foundation, we had to raise that. We had to put our fill in. We showed you the effective diagram of where we had the concrete blocks. Now we pre-leveled it. We did have to do some fine tuning when the foundation stone was actually placed onto, because now you have an extra 200-300 pounds sitting on the ground. You can tamper it and whatnot, and still you will have to tweak it out. What we're going to do now is that on Charles Smith's stone, we saw on the base that, or on the base of the stone, there was a crack, and then of course when we pulled up the foundation, we saw that in the fitting, there effectively would have been the bottom of that stone. So what we do here is that we're gonna, what we did is we had to determine where we're gonna go from here. So what we decided to do is that we're gonna put epoxy on the base, and then you have to put the top stone on the bottom, and then just because of time and temperature and your environment, once the base is set, you have to let the epoxy dry, and then you can remove your stanchions or whatnot that are supporting it. So what you're going to see here in the next cut, you have the foundation, you have the headstone, you put it on, but before you put any epoxy on, you want to verify the dry fit. Mr. Harmon's going to come up here and we're actually going to show you what we're talking about. So what you do is you verify your dry fit's good, then you're going to raise the stone, put it off to the side or suspend it. The epoxy will be placed on the base, and then we slowly place the headstone back on. Once the headstone's back on, then because the epoxy is, we call it, you'll effectively have your squeeze out, or no matter how much of a layer, it's still going to offset your level. So what you're going to do is you're going to brace the headstone while the epoxy dries. And then once the epoxy is dry, you can verify that just by slightly moving the stone, and then you can move the braces. So Mr. Harmon's going to come over and we'll show our dry fit.
Beautiful. That's it.
Okay.
Beautiful.
All right. So what we did is we verified that when the stone was set down, that all the surfaces are level. If there's any odd points or any basically odd points where if you set the stone down it would sit different, then what you didn't want to do is hit the place epoxy on, have to remove the stone, put the stone back on, and it just makes a bigger mess. And then so what we're going to do now in the next cut is that we're going to raise the stone like you saw it before. We're just going to put a epoxy right through the center, and then when we set the stone down, you'll see the bracing tools on, and we should be good to go. All right, friends and family of Oakland Cemetery, just want to give you a quick update. We have done our raise and reset of Charles Smith, who's off to my right, or excuse me, off to your right. What we had to do is, the last thing we had to do, so where we left off is that we did a dry fit, we raised the stone, and then we put the epoxy on the base. So we ran the epoxy through the center, and then we lowered the stone, and we actually have to brace it. The reason why you want to brace it, one's the epoxy is going to harden over time. We're probably going to have a couple of very cold days, a couple of very warm days here. So it may take a few hours, it may take a few days before the epoxy actually hardens. So we have it braced in the meantime, and then we'll check on it here in a couple of days. And then while that's being done, and we're with our equipment set up, the stone to the back of me is Mary Johnson. So Mary Johnson's stone is it's back here. And one thing that we know for sure that we have to do is that the stone is physically cracked. So we actually have a set of clamp tools where once we, instead of a level to level point, we have two angles. So we have to clean the surface and then put the stone together and clamp it in place so it holds. So we have to effectively dig the stone out, see where the foundation is, clamp the stone, and we'll see you in the next cut. Oops. We're back here at Mary's site, and basically kind of skipped a bunch of stuff at the beginning because we had to figure out our foundation, what we're going to do for a foundation, and go from there. we bring this point out a lot, that not every stone is going to be exactly the same. Not every stone reset experience or leveling experience is going to be the same. What we did here with Mary's stone, it was a rather light stone. So we probed around to figure out if there was a foundation to the headstone, but we didn't find anything. We probed in front of the stone, to the rear of the stone, to the left of the stone, to the right of the stone. We could not find a foundation. So what we ended up doing is that if this was the stone, we'll just assume that this is the half of the stone that's going to be in the ground. We took a large piece of concrete, put it on the front, packed the dirt in, and then we put a large piece of concrete on the back and pretty much braced the entire stone in place. So right now the stone's pretty rigid as is, and even though we mentioned that the stone is rather light, when we put the top half on, we're going to do our dry fit to verify the top stone mates with the bottom half, top half mates with the bottom half, and then we're going to remove it. Mr. Harmon actually did some pre-cleanup on the stone, and it looks really nice. Once again, we said that when the stone's in the ground, that preserved the stone pretty well, but what we'll do in the future is we'll give it more of the mechanical cleaning with the nylon brush and water, which Mr. Harmon kind of did part one of that. And then we'll spray some D2 or some wet and forget, and it'll make it really brighten up as time goes. So what we have now, we have our 10-foot tripod set up. We have our stone on a hitch, and we're just going to raise it up, set it onto the base, and then what's going to keep this in place in the meantime, when you have a fractured stone, especially when you have like a 45-degree angle or something where it's not a flat crack, these clamping tools are really handy to keep the stone in place. And what you'll see in the next cut, I can go into the description of how these clamps work, but once we get the stone actually clamped, then we'll go into detail of what we actually did. So we'll see you in the next clip. All right, friends and family, we are back here at section 1 at the conclusion of Mary Johnson's headstone. A couple things we wanted to mention. One, we kind of discussed it in a previous video. We did not find a base for the stone, so effectively we had one large tablet that was split in half. So what we did, we set the stone down, reinforced it with two large concrete blocks, and then packed the dirt in, and so that's what made the base more stable. Once that was done, we set the top of the stone down using our 10-foot chain fall. And even though it was a light stone, we still used the chain fall to take the weight of the stone while we placed the epoxy. Once the epoxy was placed, we slowly lowered the headstone down, so the top half to the bottom half, and then when it mated, we pre-fit all our clamps just to see how our clamp setup would be. So you don't want the top of the stone, we always talk about the pre-fit before the actual fit. So what we did is we did a dry run with all the clamps set up in place how we would do it, raised the stone, set the epoxy, set the stone back down, then clamped everything in place. What you don't want to do is start clamping everything in place, figuring it out. It works one way, but it doesn't work the other. Have your plan set in place, execute it, and you should be good to go. What we're going to do with Mary Johnson stones, that we're going to check it here probably in a couple of days. We've got a couple sunny days ahead of us. That should allow the epoxy to cure. We'll release all our clamps, the wooden setup, and we'll probably do a final setup or final picture here in the long run. If you have any questions or comments, leave it in the comment section below. Give us a like and a subscribe, and we appreciate your support. Good morning, friends and family at Oakland Cemetery. We're here at section 1. You saw our stone before, Charles Smith, to your left. He's still braced up. And while we're here, we have our 8-foot tripod set up, and we almost have a stone that's halfway above the ground, and we wanted to see what we were working at before we actually started running the video. But this is the headstone of Mary Ann Smith. Basically what it is, the stone was set on the ground. There was a fracture, which you can see to your left. The stone had fractured, so what we're going to do is we're going to raise the foundation, verify it's solid on the base, and that's what we have to determine with the fill. Once that is complete, we're going to set the headstone on and basically do our dry fit to see what we need to do moving forward. So we may use the epoxy, we may use various clamp setup, but we only have a limited number of tools. So based off of what you have, you just have to figure out your plan moving forward. And if you look at the video for Mary Johnson, you can see about 6 clamps that are holding that in place for that fractured stone. So it may be a couple of days before you get to your next stone, so that's just where you have to take that into account for your planning. So if anything, here in the next cut, you'll have to see the foundation raised up and on a solid base. So we'll see you in the next clip. Alrighty folks, we're back at Mary's site. Just want to give you a heads up where we're at. We've reset the foundation, so we actually took a large flat stone, put that on the bottom. We set the foundation on top of that once it was level, and then we set the stone in place, and that's what gives us the proper level. So when we place the headstone in, so what we're doing right now, we have the dry fit, and so we're going to raise the stone, put the epoxy layer on the cracked portion. We're going to slowly lower the headstone, and then we're going to clamp it in place with the tools that we have. So we have probably a 6-foot ratcheting strap. And then we also have one more clamp that we're going to use, and then we're going to be able to utilize that to hold us in place. And then we'll catch you in the next cut. Alright folks, we're back here at Mary Ann Smith's stone. So pretty much did a raise and reset, and the very last one we had based off of the material, we actually have a clamp that's on the right. We got 2 boards, another C-clamp right here to hold the boards tight. And then we actually use a ratcheting strap on the bottom, so that's the orange strap that you see on the bottom. So once the stone was raised, Mr. Harmon put the epoxy layer on it. We set the stone down, and we're just going to let it set for, it'll probably be a couple of days before the stone actually is hardened, or before the epoxy is hardened. And then we'll check in with a follow-up video or follow-up picture with the way the stone's set. So after the stone's been broke for a while, we got it raised and reset, and we will catch you in the next clip. Folks and family, we are just giving you an end recap of the work that we've done here at Oakland Cemetery Section 1. The stone to your left, Mary Johnson, that was the first one we clamped up with the epoxy, and then we're going to have to come back in about a week or so. Once the epoxy dries, the clamps will be removed. We'll clean the stone, and then give you a follow-up picture and possibly do a follow-up video just for the final finished product. The stone that we initially started with, the stone that you see to my left, or to your left, I'll read it off, and basically what it seems to be, it may be like a memorial stone, but it says, "Our little darlings, Johnny and Grable," and that was it. So we couldn't find a tomb to the left or the right, couldn't found a foundation, but in order to raise this stone, what we did is that on the base we put basically a brick on the bottom, and then used 2 reinforced pieces of concrete around the base of the stone, and then covered it in dirt. So there's probably about 4 to 6 inches of the stone submerged or below the ground. The rest of it's above, and then compared to where it was to where it is now, this is your finished product. If you have any questions or comments, leave it in the comment section below. Give us a like and subscribe, and we appreciate your support.